Something unusual is happening, and most people aren't talking about it. On social media, women are posting videos asking, "Where have all the good men gone?" Meanwhile, men are quietly going about their lives, cooking their favourite meals, finishing projects they actually enjoy, or just relaxing in their own space without anyone checking their every move. The noise of dating apps, the endless advice columns, even the viral posts about relationships, they're all happening around men who seem completely unaffected. It's almost as if the rules everyone assumed applied no longer exist. Women expected that men would feel desperate without companionship, that loneliness would push them to chase, to beg, to settle. And yet men are thriving in ways that aren't visible online. They're calmer, more focused, happier than many realise. The lives they're living quietly are the opposite of what the culture predicted. So what's really going on here? Why are men choosing solitude over the chaos that was supposed to keep them tethered? And why is this shift causing confusion, even panic, among women who thought the biology of companionship would always guarantee a man's return? You're seeing it unfold all around you, but most people don't understand why. The answers aren't obvious, and the patterns aren't what anyone expected. Could it be that men have quietly discovered something women never imagined? Something that changes everything about how we think of happiness, relationships, and choice? For decades, there's been a common belief about men that most people never question. The idea goes like this: men can't thrive without a woman by their side, that if a man is left alone, loneliness will eventually wear him down, push him to chase, and force him to return to the fold no matter the cost. Society has treated male solitude as a kind of vulnerability, a flaw waiting to be exposed. Women were expected to assume that men are incomplete without constant companionship, that emotional neediness would inevitably pull men back into relationships, even ones that were draining or toxic. The narrative suggested that a man's pride and independence was secondary to his desire for a partner. Loneliness, they assumed, was a lever that could be pulled, a pressure point that would make men bend, compromise, and seek approval. But here's the miscalculation. Men are not following the script anyone wrote for them. They're not desperate, not frantic, and not desperate for validation. Instead of crumbling under solitude, many men are adapting. They're learning to value peace over approval, freedom over obligation, and self-respect over external validation. Their independence isn't a rebellion, it's a conscious choice, a realization that life doesn't require approval to be fulfilling. The expectations about male dependency ignored something essential. Men can thrive on their own terms, build satisfaction from work, hobbies, friendships, and personal growth. Emotional resilience doesn't always come from a partner. It comes from understanding your own needs, setting boundaries, and refusing to accept chaos as a standard. So while women anticipated a predictable pattern, men returning out of loneliness, pleading for connection, the reality is completely different. Men are quietly redefining what it means to be content, and that shift is something very few anticipated. It's not desperation driving them, it's clarity. And that clarity is changing the rules entirely. You come home after a long day, expecting to finally relax, but even in the quiet of your own space, the pressure doesn't stop. Every move feels scrutinized. How you load the dishwasher, the way you fold a towel, even the tone of your voice. Nothing you do seems to go unnoticed, and somehow, no matter what you accomplish, it's never quite enough. At work, you've spent 10, 12 hours grinding, solving problems, carrying responsibility, yet by the time you step through your door, the day's stress follows you. You try to unwind, maybe watch a show or make a meal, but the micro-criticisms, the subtle tensions, they're already waiting. A comment about leaving a cup on the counter, a remark about spending too long on a hobby, a sigh at something you thought was trivial. You begin to feel like every action is measured, every choice evaluated, every effort somehow failing some invisible standard. It's not one dramatic incident that wears you down. It's the slow accumulation of these small moments, the constant background noise of expectation, a life lived in second guessing. Each micro-interruption, each tiny correction chips away at your energy, leaving a quiet exhaustion that no one notices. Over months, years, it becomes second nature. You hold back your thoughts, adjust your behavior, avoid small joys to prevent a new complaint. Even simple pleasures start to feel risky. Play a video game, and it's immature. Take a night off, and it's selfish. Decide to work overtime, and suddenly you're never present enough. It's a subtle, unrelenting cycle that quietly erodes confidence and joy. You're not being lazy or careless. You're constantly navigating a landscape where nothing is truly yours, where even your downtime is assessed. And here's the thing, most people wouldn't recognize it as pressure. On the outside, everything looks fine, but inside, it's draining. Every day you manage invisible expectations, balancing work, social obligations, and emotional labor. And while the world assumes men are naturally unbothered or simple, the truth is far more complex. This quiet tension, this constant emotional accounting shapes how men think, act, and eventually, how they choose to reclaim their freedom. At first, it's just small moments, little critiques, subtle corrections, things you barely notice. But over months and years, those tiny pressures add up, like water slowly wearing down stone. Peace becomes rare. Moments that once felt natural now feel tense, calculated. Every choice, every word, every habit feels like it could trigger disapproval, and eventually you start living in a state of quiet self-monitoring. It doesn't happen all at once. Confidence doesn't shatter overnight. Instead, it erodes slowly, piece by piece. Hobbies you once loved get shelved. Friends you once trusted drift away. Even the music you listen to, the jokes you laugh at, the way you dress, all of it begins to feel like it needs approval. You begin to ask yourself constantly, am I doing this right? And yet, there's rarely an outward explosion. Men don't always lash out, they don't storm away in anger. Instead, the shutdown is internal. Emotional energy retreats into silence. Opinions are withheld, ideas stay unspoken. Laughter feels guarded. Happiness becomes a cautious, measured thing parceled out in tiny increments to avoid conflict. The toll is subtle but deep. The tension accumulates like a quiet storm that no one else sees. You might still function at work, at home, in public, but inside a constant fatigue sets in. A slow, unrelenting exhaustion from carrying invisible weight. The problem isn't anger or rebellion, it's the withdrawal of self, the quiet resignation that peace has to come from somewhere else, because the environment that should nurture it has become a pressure cooker. And over time, as men start to realize something, the world expects them to perform endlessly, but never truly sees them. The only way to reclaim themselves is to step back, to withdraw, to find the spaces where their choices, their energy, and their peace aren't constantly under siege. Let me tell you about someone, not a headline, not a viral story, just an ordinary man in his late 30s with a stable career. For years, he navigated the same routine many men know too well. Long hours at work, careful management of home life, constant effort to meet expectations that seemed never-ending. Every choice, every hobby, every social interaction carried an unspoken weight, and over time it quietly drained him. After a long-term relationship ended, he discovered something surprising. The absence of constant scrutiny didn't leave him lonely or anxious. It gave him space to breathe. He started reconnecting with small pleasures he had set aside, cooking meals he actually enjoyed, exercising for his own energy instead of anyone else's approval, and simply sitting down in his own home without anticipating criticism. Within months, the changes were noticeable. His sleep improved. Daily stress that had once been a constant companion began to fade. He had the mental clarity to pursue personal projects he had abandoned years ago. Hobbies returned, friendships deepened, and a sense of self he hadn't realized was missing slowly re-emerged. There was no bitterness, no gloating, no triumphal declarations, just a quiet relief in rediscovering autonomy and the ability to live without the constant background tension of judgment. What had felt like pressure for decades now felt like freedom, and with it came a confidence grounded in calm, not performance. This isn't an isolated case. Across the country, men who step back from draining partnerships are experiencing similar transformations, smaller in scale, but profound in effect. Peace, clarity, and energy return, not because life suddenly became perfect, but because they've reclaimed the simple right to exist on their own terms. There comes a moment that feels almost imperceptible at first, but its impact is profound. It's the instant a man realizes that being alone isn't a punishment, isn't a gap that needs to be filled. It's a space for recovery, clarity, and control. After years of navigating expectations, judgment, and constant tension, the silence suddenly becomes something welcome instead of empty. In that moment, the small annoyances that once felt like burdens, micro-criticisms, unspoken rules, constant emotional labour, begin to fade into the background. Peace replaces tension. The home, once a stage of perpetual evaluation, transforms into a personal sanctuary, a place where decisions aren't measured by approval and daily routines are guided by preference, not obligation. Time, which had always been in short supply, now belongs entirely to the individual. He can wake up when he chooses, spend energy on projects that matter to him, and pursue hobbies that bring genuine satisfaction. There is a liberation in knowing that each choice, each action, no longer carries the weight of someone else's expectations. And with this freedom comes a subtle but powerful confidence. It's not about defiance or proving anyone wrong. It's about realizing that fulfillment does not depend on validation from a partner. Loneliness transforms into autonomy, and what once seemed like absence now feels like abundance. This is the turning point, the click where life shifts from survival to thriving. The quiet victories accumulate: better sleep, regained energy, clearer thinking, and the ability to focus on what truly matters. Solitude stops being a reminder of the loss. It becomes a canvas for creating life on one's own terms, a reminder that peace and happiness can be self-generated, without compromise, without constant negotiation, and without sacrifice of self. For most men, problem-solving comes naturally. It's how they approach work, projects, challenges. If something is broken, it can usually be fixed with effort, logic, and persistence. That instinct often carries over into relationships. We want to help, to support, to make life smoother for the people we care about. But there's a fundamental difference between solving a problem and managing someone else's emotional ecosystem, and it's one of the hardest lessons a man can learn. At some point, men begin to realize that not every issue has a solution. Some frustrations, some dissatisfaction, some emotional turmoil originate internally, and no amount of effort, advice, or compromise can resolve them. Yet, for years, men are trained or assume that it's their responsibility to fix what is broken in a partner's life. The result is a slow, almost invisible burnout, energy drained, patience stretched thin, confidence eroded. Emotional labour becomes relentless. Every attempt to help is met with criticism, resistance, or shifting expectations. The effort to meet someone else's inner demands never ends, and the pattern is exhausting. Eventually, men recognize the truth. Loving someone doesn't mean carrying their unresolved struggles as your own. You cannot engineer happiness for another adult, no matter how skilled, how empathetic, or how committed you are. It's a hard boundary to establish, because problem solving is woven into identity. But learning to step back isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. It's recognizing that healthy relationships require both partners to bring stability, not just one to carry the weight of both. Once men accept this, the dynamic shifts. Energy once spent trying to fix external chaos is redirected toward personal growth, meaningful projects, and genuine peace. The message is clear: love does not equal endless emotional labor. Being responsible for someone else's internal world is not a measure of devotion. True partnership exists only when boundaries are respected, effort is mutual, and each person maintains their own emotional health. Choosing not to fix what you cannot change is not failure, it's wisdom. It's impossible to ignore the influence of social media on modern relationships. Every scroll brings carefully curated snapshots of lives that look effortless, perfect, and endlessly exciting. Couples on exotic vacations, partners posting grand gestures, highlight reels of birthdays, dinners, and weekend adventures. The problem isn't that these moments exist, it's that they set a standard no one actually lives by. When you compare your own life to these polished portrayals, it's easy to feel like you're falling short. The spontaneous nights in, the quiet dinners, the routines and compromises, the reality of most relationships can start to feel dull, inadequate, or unremarkable by comparison. And it doesn't take long for that sense of inadequacy to spill over into perception. Every small disagreement, every moment of routine tension suddenly seems magnified, because it doesn't measure up to the fantasy being fed online. This isn't limited to women noticing men, or men noticing women. It's a cultural phenomenon. Constant exposure to impossible ideals reshapes expectations for both sides. Real life is messy, it's imperfect, it's filled with micro moments of compromise and negotiation. Social media erases those subtleties, leaving only the polished outcomes and the impression that happiness should always look spectacular. Over time, this comparison culture subtly shifts priorities. Instead of appreciating what's tangible and authentic, people begin to chase ideals that don't exist. Emotional satisfaction becomes tied to performance, presentation, and external validation rather than genuine connection. For men stepping back from relationships, this shift is both revealing and liberating. They see that much of the pressure they've experienced was never about them, but about trying to meet an impossible template shaped by other people's curated lives. Solitude, free from constant comparison, suddenly feels like relief, clarity, and authenticity. Take a step back and look at the modern dating landscape, and it becomes clear why many men are stepping away. Dating apps dominate the conversation, turning relationships into a game of endless choices. Profiles, swipes, messages. It's easy to feel like there are unlimited options on both sides, but the reality is far more uneven than it appears. Studies suggest that attraction is not evenly distributed. A relatively small percentage of men receive the majority of attention, while many others, who are reliable, kind, and successful, find themselves overlooked. Meanwhile, women are often navigating a market where the perceived top tier is always out of reach, and the average men are consistently passed over. This imbalance creates frustration, confusion, and a sense of scarcity on both sides. For men who are consistently giving effort and attention only to be ignored or undervalued, the lesson becomes clear. The emotional and social investment isn't always worth the return. Commitment, loyalty, and patience aren't rewarded evenly in a system driven by instant judgments, comparisons, and curated appearances. Over time, repeated experiences like this quietly reshape priorities. Many men begin to focus on what they can control: career, hobbies, friendships, and personal growth, rather than trying to navigate an unpredictable dating market. It's not fear or avoidance, it's a rational response to the incentives in the system. When effort is misaligned with reward, when kindness and consistency go unnoticed, while flashy or idealized traits dominate attention, stepping back becomes a strategy, not a surrender. Understanding this dynamic explains a lot about today's dating culture, why men may hesitate to approach, why some relationships never form, and why many men prioritize independence and personal fulfillment over romantic pursuit. Solitude becomes not a loss, but a space to reclaim energy, focus, and self-respect. A conscious choice in response to a market that rarely plays fair. Men have always faced a complex set of expectations, but in today's world, the rules can feel contradictory, even impossible. Say one thing, do another. No matter what choice is made, there's often criticism waiting. It's a pattern of mixed messages. Be independent but attentive, confident but sensitive, ambitious but always available. Every action carries potential judgment, and for men navigating these waters, the lesson is clear. Effort alone doesn't guarantee approval. Over time, men start noticing the invisible calculus. One decision is praised in one context and punished in another. Spend time with friends, too distant. Focus on work, too distracted. Take initiative in the relationship, too controlling. Wait for direction. Not decisive enough. The standards shift constantly, and the consequences are rarely proportional or predictable. This is what drives quiet disengagement. It's not bitterness, rage, or rebellion. It's rational adaptation. Men learn through experience that some conflicts can't be resolved by effort or good intentions alone. They start conserving energy, focusing on what they can control, and withdrawing from spaces where every move risks criticism or misinterpretation. What looks like avoidance from the outside is actually a carefully considered response to an environment where rules are unclear and expectations are endless. Withdrawal becomes a form of self-preservation, a way to protect emotional energy, maintain stability, and reclaim autonomy. In essence, men aren't leaving relationships out of fear or disdain. They're choosing not to participate in a system that consistently punishes good intentions and rewards only superficial or unpredictable behaviors. The disengagement isn't an act of resentment, it's a practical strategy. It's about maintaining peace of mind, preserving dignity, and understanding that constant compromise without mutual respect is a path to exhaustion rather than connection. Once men step back from constant judgment and conflicting expectations, something remarkable happens. Life starts to feel lighter. Solitude, far from being lonely, becomes a space to breathe, to think, and to reclaim time that was previously spent navigating others' demands. Everyday routines, once pressured and tense, now feel peaceful. Cooking a favourite meal, enjoying a quiet morning, or sinking into a hobby isn't an obligation, it's a choice. Mental clarity follows naturally. Without the constant background noise of criticism or emotional calculation, thoughts become sharper. Decisions are made with confidence, not fear of misinterpretation. Plans are pursued without hesitation, and energy that was once scattered across trying to satisfy others is now focused entirely on personal priorities. Financial stability also emerges as a byproduct. When choices are no longer dictated by someone else's expectations, no elaborate gifts, no constant appeasement, no extra spending to prevent tension, resources accumulate. Men gain control over their own money, their own schedules, and their own goals, and the satisfaction of self-sufficiency reinforces independence. Personal growth and creative energy return as well. Hobbies once shelved are revisited, passions are explored, and long-neglected skills are nurtured. Projects, exercise, learning. These pursuits are now driven by desire, not obligation. Every small accomplishment builds confidence, reinforcing the realization that fulfillment doesn't require validation from a partner. The result is calm satisfaction, a sense of peace, control, and forward momentum that comes from living life on one's own terms. Modern solitude isn't a gap to be filled. It's a reward. It's freedom from impossible expectations, freedom to pursue authentic interests, and freedom to be fully present with oneself. For many men, this quiet, deliberate autonomy becomes more meaningful than any relationship they once believed they needed to thrive. As men quietly step back and focus on their own lives, many women are noticing, but struggling to make sense of it. Articles and social media posts proclaim, "Where have all the good men gone?" Dating advice trends encourage reflection, strategies, and even urgency, as if men's absence is a problem to be solved rather than a signal to reconsider dynamics. This isn't about blame or judgment, it's an observation. When the expected flow of attention, effort, and commitment slows or disappears, it creates confusion. Many women encounter a sudden mismatch between cultural assumptions and reality. The men who were once assumed to always be available, responsive, and accommodating are now prioritizing autonomy, personal growth, and calm. That shift is hard to process when the framework of expectation hasn't changed. Media narratives amplify this perception. Stories suggest men are scared, avoiding, or disengaged, but they rarely explore the underlying reasons. Instead of focusing on the choices men are making for self-preservation and fulfillment, coverage often frames male withdrawal as a mystery, leaving women wondering what went wrong or how to fix it. This confusion is compounded by decades of mixed messaging in dating culture. Women are taught to expect attention, commitment, and emotional investment, but the men they expected to fill those roles are now pursuing stability and satisfaction outside traditional frameworks. The result is a cultural tension. Men quietly building their lives, women confronted with the absence they never anticipated, and a feedback loop of uncertainty. The key point here is subtle but critical. This reaction is not about fault, it's about adaptation. Men are changing behavior in response to lived experience, and women are adjusting to that new reality. Understanding the causes and observing the shift without judgment is the first step toward clarity for both sides about how relationships and personal priorities are evolving in today's culture. As men increasingly prioritize peace, autonomy, and personal fulfillment, the landscape of relationships is quietly shifting. The future isn't about scarcity or blame, it's about recalibration. What we're seeing is a movement toward partnerships based on mutual value rather than obligation, compromise under duress, or adherence to unrealistic ideals. Expect fewer but healthier relationships. Men are no longer willing to sacrifice emotional energy, hobbies, friendships, or mental clarity for connections that drain them. Women who understand the importance of respect, appreciation, and shared effort will find partners who are fully present. Those who rely on criticism, unrealistic standards, or constant validation will encounter resistance. This is not a punishment. It's the natural consequence of autonomy meeting expectation. Standards are rising, but not in terms of fantasy. They're grounded in behavior, consistency, and genuine compatibility. Emotional intelligence, accountability, and respect for boundaries are becoming non-negotiable. Social media highlight reels, dating app games, and performative gestures lose their influence when men and women alike begin valuing authenticity over appearance. There will be an adjustment period. Some confusion, hesitation, and trial and error are inevitable. Old patterns die slowly, and cultural expectations don't shift overnight. But the overall trajectory is clear. Relationships that survive and thrive will be reciprocal, respectful, and rooted in realistic understanding. For men, this means choosing peace over chaos and clarity over obligation. For women, it means recognizing that influence is earned through value, not entitlement. The reward for both sides is simple but profound: connection that enhances life rather than diminishes it. In the end, this is a moment of opportunity. It's a chance to redefine partnerships on terms that honor autonomy, encourage growth, and celebrate genuine compatibility. The future of relationships isn't about settling. It's about creating bonds that truly work for both people, built on respect, freedom, and shared purpose. Here's the final takeaway. Peace has become a standard, not a luxury. Men are learning that self-respect outweighs external validation, and that calm is more valuable than constant compromise. Choosing to be alone isn't a sign of failure or fear. It's a conscious decision to preserve energy, dignity, and clarity. In the past, the assumption was that any relationship, even a draining one, was better than solitude. Today, that notion is being rewritten. Men are discovering that a life free from constant critique, impossible expectations, and emotional chaos is not empty. It's fulfilling. Hobbies, friendships, work, and personal growth flourish when they are prioritized, and every choice is made for the right reasons: autonomy, happiness, and well-being. This doesn't mean giving up on love or connection. It means setting a standard. Relationships must add to life, not subtract from it. Respect, effort, and authenticity are no longer optional. They are prerequisites. The days of sacrificing peace for perceived obligation are fading. Men who embrace solitude find that life isn't a compromise, it's a canvas. And when the right partnership comes along, it will complement, not compete with, the contentment already cultivated. The ultimate lesson is simple. Peace isn't just desirable, it's non-negotiable. Protect it, value it, and build life around it. Because once you've tasted freedom, calm, and clarity, you won't settle for anything less. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever chosen solitude over a draining relationship? What changes did it bring to your life? Peace, focus, or clarity? Or maybe you're still navigating the balance between connection and calm. Share your experiences below. Let's normalize making choices that protect mental health and self-respect. Your story might help someone else see that being alone can be empowering, not lonely. Together, we can shift the conversation toward dignity and intentional living.